Welcome, Gothamites, to a very special supplemental episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. Joining me, as always, is the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea. I almost got through that one. I'm very excited because as listeners of the show would know that we very rarely do conversations with guests because it's not really that kind of show. We don't do a lot of sponsored stuff. And I want to make something very clear. This episode is not sponsored by our guest. It is not sponsored by the publisher. Frankly, whenever we come across material that begs for a conversation instead of a simple analysis, we do everything we can to get that writer or filmmaker or artist onto the show. And luckily, we have so many mutual friends, and our guest has already been so delightful and generous with his time that getting him to join the show was not a difficult feat. You may know him primarily for his work on screen as an actor in Dune, Oppenheimer, James Gunn's Suicide Squad, Last Voyage of the Demeter, Late Night with the Devil, Ant-Man. He just recently won a Saturn Award for his role in Dexter Resurrected, where he worked with our dear friend Scott Reynolds. And he is the host of Grave Conversations. Please welcome Mr. David Dastmalchian.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Drea. Thank you guys for having me. I love it, and I love the show, and I love what you're doing with this space. And hi, listeners. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And we know that this conversation is really important and will be definitely cherished by our listeners.
Thanks. It's cherished by me. Storytelling is a conversation. That's what it all is. And conversation is sometimes hard when it's really big, complicated stuff, but just talking is, it's a form of storytelling. Like even in micro form, when you're just talking to someone, you are connecting them with your story and you're hopefully listening to theirs. And so I think this podcast, this show in particular has, it's got an important place there's so many podcasts. My God, at this stage, there's a podcast about people laying in coffins. What will they think of next? But this one's really important. And so I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
I think, first of all, it is woefully lesser known that you're also an incredible, accomplished comic book writer. I have personally loved some of your work, Count Crowley, the work that you did with Creature Commandos, Knights versus Samurai, and now you've got a brand new book called Through. I want to ask you, for someone who has not yet read the book, what is the premise of the story?
Through is the story of Alex, a college student in Chicago who is, for all intents and purposes, living at the top form of her functionality. She is a overachieving student, an achieving exercise enthusiast. She's an orphan who has done all of this without the benefit of any privilege. She's literally gotten herself scholarship to go to college and is just somebody that you would look at from the outside and go, that is an overachiever with a capital O. Alex is just quite literally breaking inside, internally. And at the beginning of our story, while on a run in a frigid Chicago winter by Lake Michigan, falls after making a really interestingly not very thoughtful choice about how she was going to run, falls into the freezing water and is rescued by this seemingly homeless old man who, in pulling her out of the freezing water, has a stroke and goes into a coma. And when Alex wakes up in the hospital, the police are curious how she knew the man who rescued her. And when she says she's never seen him before in her life, they're confused because his pockets are filled with all manner of maps and clues and information about Alex, her day-to-day life, where she lives, what she does. So she becomes obsessed with figuring out who this old man is who rescued her and why he's obsessed with her. And in doing so, she breaks into his little apartment. Turns out he was a school janitor who had no family, spoke to no one, had no social interactions, and yet was meticulously working his life's passion in a small, crafted art form that she ends up discovering, and in discovering falls into an entirely other realm. And I would say, if you are a fan of movies like Pan's Labyrinth or even Black Swan, or if you loved the Vertigo books of the 90s, just know that this writer humbly attempted his best to conjure all those feelings, while still being true to his love of Frank Baum and Lewis Carroll.
I'm so happy that you mentioned classic writers as well. One thing that I couldn't help but to create a parallel to in some way, shape, or form was not The Wizard of Oz, but Return to Oz.
Return to Oz, very much. It's much more Return to Oz than The Wizard of Oz. It's as dark as Return to Oz.
Yes, for sure. I want to ask, why is now the right time for a story like Through to live in the world?
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer. I don't know if now is the right time for it to live in the world. I know that now is the right time for it to come out of me. 23 and 10/12, what is that? Years ago, I came out from under the enslavement of narcotics and alcohol addiction when I took my last shot of opiates and walked away from drugs and alcohol, and thereby thought I was fully freeing myself from the binds of psychological, emotional escape that drugs and alcohol provided for me, by creating a place where I could control my emotional flow. One of the fascinating things about drugs and alcohol is that they are like a timed, if you imagine all drugs and alcohol being just like a pill, like Alice in Wonderland, it's like a little blue pill. You can take it when you want to feel different, obviously. And then when that wears off, you can also become addicted to that feeling that you get in the removal of it. And then with the power of just one pill, you go right back. So when I let go of that, I began a journey of freedom that really was just a beginning. Because even though I stopped utilizing drugs and alcohol to control that emotional and psychological and, dare I say, spiritual river that I am, I turned to relationships with other people, love, work, sex, food, you name it. All of these other mechanisms by which I could control that psychological and emotional track. And the one that became the most detrimental to my mental health and well-being was my addiction to people and to compulsive control. Meanwhile, simultaneously, I was becoming a working artist in Chicago, and I was fascinated and obsessed with the idea of Henry Darger, who was a Chicago outsider artist who'd created this incredible world of books and paintings that no one ever saw because he kept them to himself in his little apartment. And after he died and they went into his apartment to clean it out, they found an entire universe that he'd created. And I feel that way about all of us, that all of us have these secret universes that we contain within ourselves that we keep secret. So as this story, this mystery in my imagination started to unfold and Alex's journey started to unfold, I similarly went on this path of trying to understand why my attachment disruptions and disorders and the fear that I had of being abandoned and betrayed had led to a place where I was just experiencing so much pain and causing so much pain. And miraculously, at the same time that the publishers of this book, Z2, had read my pitch idea for the book, and they decided to say, yes, we want you to write this. Here's we'll give you 120 pages. I ended up taking many more than that to write a graphic novel. They gave me that green light at exactly the same moment that the universe, whatever you choose to believe, decided that my disorders and struggles were going to come to a volcanic eruption, in which they did. And I went through an entirely cataclysmic, life-changing personal breakdown that basically all of the infrastructure I built around myself by controlling a sense of safety and security was unraveled. And I found myself utterly alone. So while I was working with 2 therapists, a support group, reinvesting myself fully into my recovery community, I was also writing this book. And to me, it just felt like this book needed to be written at this time by me. Now I put it into the world and I go, well, shit, it's a tale as old as time. How hard is it for people to ask for help? It's been hard for people to ask for help, since probably we became so protective and afraid of making ourselves vulnerable to what could potentially happen if we opened ourselves up and were either rejected by the tribe or abandoned outside of the cave. It's probably been going on for thousands of years. But now more than ever, I know many people who could really benefit if they were encouraged to be able to reach out and ask for help and talk to others. And at the end of the day, that's going to be the make or break power for Alex in this story. So maybe that's why, I don't know. The world is a dark and scary place, and it seems to get darker and scarier sometimes every day. And you go, man, I wish people realized that they weren't as alone as they think they are. That's a long answer to your question, but it's what I've been thinking about a lot lately with, like, why do I want people to buy this book? Other than I think the art is kick-ass and the story is hopefully really fun and the mystery of it all is exciting. But why am I going to ask people to part with their money and their time? Not just to see me go through a therapeutic exercise, obviously, but because I do think I want people to be encouraged to know that they don't have to do shit alone, and they can ask for help.
One of the reasons that we have this podcast is definitely, aligned with what you're saying, that people don't talk about mental health, or mental health has been, in my field, sort of gatekept. And we wanted to create a space where people can talk about mental health through storytelling. So I just want to thank you I had the pleasure of reading the book over my winter break. As our listeners know, I don't talk about it that much. I'm not able to, but I am a psychologist at UCLA. And it was so delightful and inspiring to read the story about this young person and recognize these experiences, these features, her identity is so realistic to the clients, the students, the young people that I work with. And I wanted to ask you, specifically for young readers, what were you hoping youth with mental illness or struggling with their mental health would take from this? And does the medium of being a graphic novel relate to that choice?
Thank you for saying that, first and foremost. And thank you for reading the book, and thank you for being a supporter of my work. And thank you for the work that you're doing, which is so important. Young minds and young hearts are and older. I like to say I'm older, not old, but older minds and hearts, but definitely young hearts and young minds are so readily accessibly open to being available to things that fall into a space of, I believe, music, art, video games, entertainment, comic books, film, television, there's this like excitement and willingness. And we have it and I have it, I should say, as an older person. Of course I do. But there's something very special with the young imagination. And to me, the thought that a young person or, somebody who's on the beginning of their journey of mental wellness, or somebody who's deep in the pit of the throes of a mental struggle would, see a very cool cover of a book at a comic shop or at their Barnes and Noble and grab it along with their favorite manga or their favorite, Justice League, latest trade paperback, whatever it is that they're collecting. And they might, by some, store recommendation or podcast recommendation, grab this book, throw it in their pile, bring it home, read the story, get transported to another place, but between the lines, start to really feel and understand why it's so important for the protagonist of this story to be able to ask for help. And maybe, possibly, whatever their gender identity, to be able to identify and see a bit of themselves in Alex. She embodies a lot of the characteristics that I see in a lot of people, and especially in young people. Isolationism, even though we're more connected than ever through the power of social media and the internet, people seem to be so isolated. And the disconnection between being able to talk and tell somebody how you're truly, really feeling, as opposed to how you need to present how you're feeling. What a scary time it is. How terrifying it must be when you know that the world of social media is looking at you, to be able to say, I'm hurting, I'm scared, I'm considering ending my life. I am feeling like this anxiety attack is never going to end. I haven't had a good night's sleep in months because I just am racked with guilt or shame or fear. And there's not a single person, I believe, yet who has gone through that and come through it to the other side safely alone. And I just want young people to know that. I was so terrified when I was contemplating, suicide, and when I was preparing and planning and thinking about how to do it, and thinking about how much better it would feel to stop having to wake up feeling the way that I felt. And that I was honestly at that time in my life believing I would be doing a probably benefit or a favor to those around me or those who love me if I didn't exist anymore. Those are such dark, sad, untrue, false thoughts. But I was thinking them in a vacuum, alone. I wasn't talking to anyone. And luckily for me, when I did cry out for help and reach out for help, it wasn't verbally, it was in an attempt to end my life. And luckily I did not succeed. And therefore help was kind of thrust upon me. But not everybody gets that opportunity. And when you're reading this book, I'm sure many people will be like, what the heck is Alex doing in the first 5 pages of the book? Because it will become no illusion to you that she is definitely feeling lulled by the idea of not existing anymore. And it makes me so sad to think about how many people feel that way. And I wish anybody who's listening and hearing this and feels that way, or anybody who's feeling that way right now, would know that they could just get on the phone with someone and talk to somebody, that there is help and there is a way.
I appreciate you sharing with candidness and vulnerability, those moments. I will definitely say that I'm glad you are here, and I'm glad that your message is here. And I predict that your book and your voice, as I know you're very open about your recovery and your experiences with addiction and mental health, I know that discourse, those conversations, your podcast, that reaches a lot of people, and it has an impact. You did mention the work that you've done with Kat Staggs. Kat is such an amazing, brilliant, talented artist. Her resume is endless. When you see a Kat Staggs piece, it really stands out. It has her branding. This art is very stylized, and I'm curious to hear from you, the decisions that you made with Kat. How did she come to work with you in this project, and what were those? What was that collaboration like?
Kat and I were connected through the power of great editors. I love it when editors come up with their lists of like, what do you think of this artist? What do you think of this artist? And I had said that I felt very compelled because the story, my protagonist is a woman. I thought it would be helpful for me as a male writer to find someone who identifies female to 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 help me shape what this story is with that added perspective. And this incredible woman, Kat Staggs, who's been making amazing art, doing a lot of cool stuff with superheroes and spaces that I also love, read the book, said, I really love this. We met. We went for coffee at the Museum of Jurassic Technology, which was a place that really inspired me when I was initially writing the book. That's where the Zendalgian sewing needle miniatures exist that I saw for the first time, that inspired the whole through portal. And she started sending her art, and I collaborated with her briefly. My writing partner Leah Kilpatrick and I wrote a short for the DC Horror Presents about Dollhouse and Dollmaker, and Kat did that work, and I loved collaborating with her. And what's great with Kat is, like, I write the descriptions in the panels for the script, and I leave a lot of room for her to explore artistically what she feels compelled to do. And she never fails to, like, astound me. And I'm so lucky. I'm so grateful. It's really cool. It's a really cool feeling as a writer to get sent an email with pencils and then eventually the inks, and you just go, oh my God, how lucky are we? And David Mack's cover is glorious. It's really beautiful. I love what he did. He really encapsulates the spirit and tone and energy of the book. I think he provides a great invitation for readers to grab it. And I hope, again, I don't want to, like, gender target anything with this, but I do hope young women who have felt that, like, comic books and graphic novels are a boy's place may see a story like this and be inspired to give this form of storytelling a chance that they haven't before. That would make me feel incredible, because I know growing up at my comic shop, it was mostly boys, there. And now I see such a diverse, populace when I go to local comic shops. I see so many more, people going into shops than I ever did before. But yeah, that would be really cool.
It's an absolutely beautiful book in every way, and I'm curious. Without giving away any spoilers, obviously, I do think it's important to talk a little bit about the ending and what it means, that the journey to self-discovery and healing doesn't necessarily end just because you got to where you thought you were going, that there's always more work to do. Talk a little bit about that and what it means for you to say that out loud.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything for the reader, but I also want you to know, when you go check out the book, if you are so kind as to check out through, when I initially finished the book, I did what I often feel compelled to do, because I do feel a sense of obligation as a storyteller to give each story its proper depth. And I want it to be comforting, whether it's horror or science fiction or drama. I still want my reader or my audience I want the lights to go down. I want you to close that book, and I want you to feel a sense of, like, breath and completion, because reading a book is a life cycle. Watching a movie is a life cycle. And I have such a strong relationship with my readers that I want to, like, give them a hug at the end of the book. I want to be like, okay, and we're safe. We're okay. So I delivered that version of the book. And then we got all the way to, like, weeks from printing. and I'm reading the book, and my dear friend and mentor and brother, Brian Fuller, had read the book. And we just kept going back and forth and having this conversation about like, did I just tie it up with too neat of a bow? Did I just make it seem too simple? Because the truth is 24 years into my mental health journey, and some days it feels like it's just begun. And there are days when I wake up and I go, oh my God, is it all back? And then I remember, oh, I've got all these new tools. No, it's not. And I'm going to be okay. And I just want to say really quick as an aside, if you feel like all of it is fruitless and useless and you're like, I've done therapy, I've tried medication, I've done it. I promise you one thing I can guarantee, not that you're not going to feel awful, not that you're not going to have sleepless nights of anxiety, not that you're not going to contemplate how, what it may feel like to take your life. But what I can promise you is with the tools and with the experience and with the practice, you do learn that it does eventually subsist. And you can maintain, if you can stay on your raft and you can tend to your raft, the river will get choppy. It will sway all different ways, but it does always get better. That's the only thing I can promise you that. But to go back to the ending, so I called my editor in one of those 11th hour fits of frenzy, and I was like, Rance, and I love Rance Hosley has been just the best advocate for this book. He's such an incredible editor. He's such a good human, and he loves this world, and he loves comics, and he loves storytelling. I said, I'm so sorry. I hate to do this, but I need to change the ending. It's too buttoned up, and that's not authentic to my experience. And he was like, okay, we're going to print in like a matter of days. And I was like, I know. And he's like, all the proofs have been approved and like everything is lined up. I was like, I know. And by the grace of God, they miraculously were able to finagle and give me an opportunity to add just a something that I felt was necessary, and that to me, the layers of the onion of my mental health and my psychology, it's not a binary. There's not a finish line for it, but that doesn't mean that there isn't improvement, and it doesn't get better, and it doesn't get more and more, healthy. So I wanted to somehow make sure the audience was left with that feeling of hope, but also knowing that the journey is ever going,
That's so powerful, David. And we truly hope that more folks check out your book and check out your, the next few months of your events and your panels and podcasts. My last question was, what's next for you? Where can folks find Through? And what's going on at WonderCon and Comic-Con this year?
Yay! So Through is being put out by Z2 Publishing. You can find it at your local comic shop. You can also find it online through Z2. I'm sure soon you could probably just get it off Amazon as well. But please, if you can, go to your local comic shop and support them. And if they don't have a copy of it on the shelf, wait the week for them to order it, because we want to give them business. Every dollar counts and keeps those brick and mortar shops running. They are like churches. And I'm going to be promoting the hell out of this. When you do books, especially a book like this, there's no existing IP. I'm not working for, Marvel or DC, who I love, but like, we don't have like some expansive visibility, and there isn't a deep pocket marketing strategy team to like work on this stuff with. So I'm out there trying to hit as many comic shops and conventions as I can to talk about the book. And if people want me to sign their One Piece poster to help them, show up, that's great. We'll make it work. And speaking of, I'm currently on the new season of One Piece, which I love and I think is one of the greatest mangas ever written. And I'm so grateful to be a part of the live action adaptation. I'm also a part of the TV series Murderbot. We're getting ready to film a second season of that.
We absolutely love that show.
Thank you. I think it's a beautiful show. It's so well written. I recently went to South by Southwest to premiere a film called Sender, but I have no idea when that'll be coming out. My company, Good Fiend Films, we're doing a lot of really exciting things. We just wrapped production on a new feature film called Kodak Super XX with Kelly Marie Tran and Ron Perlman. In the comic book space, in the writing space, next to Through, I have a new series called The Accessories, which will be coming from Panic in June with my co-creator Leah Kilpatrick, and it's the story of all the great monster sidekicks and henchmen who are their own team now. And then I have another book that I wrote with Leah that will be coming from Dark Horse, which starts, issue 1 drops in middle of July, and I love it. It's called Kingdom of Earth. And if you can imagine a near future apocalyptic event where every monster that was ever written down by man, from every Stephen King story to every Greek mythology to every European lore, they all came to life and all rose from the ground and the sea, and they've decimated humanity and basically enslaved us, kind of like Planet of the Apes. And now all the monsters are battling for dominance on Earth while the humans are just trying to survive. And I sometimes feel like we're living in a world where a lot of monsters are fighting for dominance while us humans are just trying to survive. But right. There's a lot, and I'm doing a lot of work in therapy right now. I've it's a complicated journey. I'm so grateful for it. If anyone, I don't ever care to like proselytize or tell you how things work, because I'm not a professional and it's not my place, but I have benefited greatly from the IFS model of therapy, which stands for internal family systems, which is often colloquially referred to as parts work, and learning that the parts of my personality aren't the whole totality of who I am. And they are often there to protect me from both threats, real and imagined. And I've learned a lot of tools for regulating my emotions so that my consciousness can be present in the way that maybe a loving parent could be to like erratic and scared children inside. So learning how to be my own primary partner has been a big journey for me through therapy. EMDR and just DBT therapy has been really beneficial to that. Just trying to learn how to be my own source of safety and support, so I'm not looking at other people as that. Not sitting there waiting for that text, waiting for that phone call, waiting for that person to validate me and make me feel safe. Like, how can David find that within himself and thereby really find that kind of peace and serenity that I think we're all entitled to? And I think you deserve it. If you're listening to this and you're feeling miserable, know that you do deserve to feel better, and you can. And being creative is a big part of my healing. I love it. Even if it's something that no one's ever going to see, I love just making crazy monster drawings with my kids or, whatever.
Well, we are so grateful for your storytelling and for getting to know you better through this conversation. And we're so excited for the work that you've been talking about. Congratulations again on the book Through. And we're super excited. There's lots of exciting things happening. And what better way to be hopeful and to be future oriented and to think about managing and balancing the weight that we feel on our shoulders. So again, thank you so much for being on the show. From the bottom of my heart, I'm just so grateful for having you partner with us. And we'll definitely be talking about Through for the next couple of months as we take the show on the road.
Thank you, Dr. D.
This was an absolute perfect conversation. If you want to learn more about Through, why don't you go visit David at WonderCon at his panel. David Dastmalchian, comic book movie actor to comic book creator. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. It's Saturday, March 28th at 6:30 p.m. in North 100B. And then, hey, when you're done with that, why don't you come on over to our panel at 8 o'clock, just a half hour later in room 300A. That is, of course, the psychological journey of the Lord of the Rings, where we'll be talking with a couple of special guests and super fans about Tolkien and his legendarium, and doing a deep psychological dive into some of your favorite characters, whether they're heroes or villains, and maybe even characters you've never heard of. So come check that out. Again, that's 300A. At 8 p.m. on Saturday. And David's, again, is at 6:30 p.m. that same night in North 100B. And that is David Dastmalchian, comic book movie actor to comic book creator.
Thank you guys so much. Have a beautiful day.